And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account.
I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families.
But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle. Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sky News has seen firsthand how the city of Rafah has been turned into a wasteland almost a year into the war in Gaza. Labour's biggest union backer has accused the government of being cruel over cuts to the winter fuel payment. Unite is calling on the Prime Minister to reverse the decision. And a man freed from prison under the government's early release scheme has been jailed after being charged with a sexual assault. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the writer and broadcaster, Nickell-Turner, and the political commentator, Benedict Spence. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Mail on Sunday reports that a controversial vote on landmark assisted dying legislation could be held within weeks. The Sunday Express leads on what it describes as Labour's assault on pensioners, claiming they could be £1,000 worse off if the government decided to axe the single-person discount on council tax. Fears that Russia has shared nuclear secrets with Iran in return for weapons to bomb Ukraine feature on the front page of The Observer. The Times is reporting that 5 former defence secretaries and an ex-prime minister are urging Sir Keir Starmer to allow Ukraine to use long-range Storm Shadow missiles to fire into Russia with or without US backing. On the Sunday Mirror, Strictly star Pete Wicks has talked about saving his mum's life when he was 12 years old. And the Sunday Telegraph reports that ministers are planning to allow hybrid cars to remain on the market until 2035, backing away from a total ban on the sale of petrol-powered vehicles. And Keith Lemon, comic Lee Francis, makes the front of the Daily Star with claims his former house was haunted. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Amy Nickell-Turner and Benedict Spence. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Times, and this refrain basically directed towards the Prime Minister to go it alone and allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles into the heart of Russia, even without the support of the United States. Benedict?
Yes, it's an ongoing theme, actually. Ukraine requires equipment to repel the Russian invasion. Western countries spend a very long time dragging their heels over the process. The United States discusses it at great length in Congress and tries to tack other things onto the edge of a bill to fund these sorts of things. And all the while, Ukraine's capacity is ground down by Russia's significantly larger arsenal, and of course by the fact that Russia is not playing by the same rules that the West is imposing on Ukraine, which is that you can only use X, Y, Z weapons, you can only use them in a defensive capacity, whatever that is supposed to mean. You're not allowed to use them inside Russia, you're not allowed to cross the border into Russia, but Russia can do whatever it wants on your territory because they're the bad guys and we have no real influence over them. Well, the Ukrainians have been asking for a very long time, please let us have these weapons so that we can at the very least defend ourselves on our own terms. And I think now we're getting to the stage where I think patience is running thin in some Western countries, not all, but some, that this is just being elongated. And this is, I suppose, the moral position from former British defence secretaries and a former British Prime Minister saying, look, even if the United States continues to want to drag its heels for its own domestic reasons, there is nothing to say that we can't sanction allowing them to use our equipment inside Russia. We're already doing that. You know, there are already British Challenger tanks and stuff inside the Kursk region right now. And any suggestion that Russia might, escalate the violence as a result of this, well, they are already occupying parts of Ukraine. You know, this has been the sort of Damocles hanging over this conflict the whole time, is that, oh, you can't upset the Russians too much because they might nuke Ukraine off the face of the earth, which would completely defeat the purpose of invading in the first place. But there is another side to this, which is that the Ukrainians have been saying, sotto voce, for a long time, look, if you don't actually let us use these sorts of weapons, well, we're going to have to find alternative means of harming the Russians. And that probably means going after not Russia's tanks or its air force or anything like that. It means going after its oil and gas infrastructure and doing so covertly by blowing it up. What does that do? That affects global energy prices, and that hurts the US and Britain and other countries as well. So I suspect a lot of this is also partly not just about letting them defend themselves militarily, but also saying, look, if we don't do this, they're going to have to find other means of defending themselves that'll end up hurting us as well. So we might as well let them push on with it.
Amy, quite a lot of voices urging the Prime Minister to go it alone and act without the cooperation of the United States. Grant Shapps, Sir Ben Wallace, Sir Gavin Williamson, Penny Mordaunt, Sir Liam Fox and Boris Johnson, and warning the Prime Minister that further delay would, in fact, embolden President Putin.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those names, because that was actually what I wanted to pick up on, because some of these quotes are incredibly compelling. Boris Johnson saying there is no conceivable case for delay. Ben Wallace has said anything else at this point is appeasing Putin. So when you say patience is wearing thin, you can certainly hear that out of the quotes that are coming from these former defence secretaries and, of course, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And, yeah, it's true, military experts are all backing Starmer, and it's just the case that Biden just wanted to take a bit more time because on his side things are a bit more split. But then you've got Anthony Blinken, who is absolutely certain that this is the way to get through this stalemate, is to go ahead with further pushing in on with these missiles. But of course, you mentioned, the ways that potentially the attacks could change and evolve, and I think some commentators have been looking at the way that Russia could also further their offences in Ukraine. And they were saying how, yes, we've got this talk of what's going on with the Iran nuclear deal, which, of course, Anthony Blinken also mentioned. He said it's a two-way street. It's such a volatile region, and it will increase instability and tension. But before the prospect of nuclear, we've also got the prospect of massive cyber attacks, things that Russia could do in terms of our social media here in the UK. But I think one thing's clear is that Putin definitely has his eye on the UK at the moment with some of the inferences that he's been coming out with this week.
Benedict, there have been those that are saying this nuclear threat, I mean, it's been hanging around for a very long time, and it is simply an empty threat from Putin.
I mean, we have to think about this in terms of what actually is Russia's end goal here. Is it to create an inhospitable landscape in Ukraine which can't be used for anything? I don't think that's going to go down particularly well with the Russian people. If you go in, you lose tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of your own people, and then you launch a nuclear weapon and you go, well, that was all worth it, wasn't it? Yes, we've really made great strides here. The other thing that we have to remember is, though, it's not just NATO that's involved in this. And, Russia perhaps sees part of this as a proxy conflict with NATO. Russia's economy is deeply dependent on other countries around the world. It's been able to circumvent sanctions because countries like India and China have propped up its economy by going, well, we will fill the void in terms of buying your products that the West now isn't doing. China is a very powerful country. That doesn't need saying. It has its own concerns. It has its own issues in its backyard. It has its own competitors. Now, if the demon, if you like, is let out of the bottle again with nuclear weapons being used, the first thing that will happen is that you'll see a ratcheting up of non-nuclear powers saying, this is on the table now. We have to consider nuclear weapons. The first of those will be Japan. China doesn't want that. China doesn't want a situation where its regional rivals are all going, nuclear weapons can be used again, we better get some of our own. That's going to make its own ability to throw its weight around in its backyard much more difficult. It's also going to have massive knock-on effects, of course, for issues that are very important to China, such as global trade, which is already incredibly fragile at the moment. So you have to think about this not just in terms of Western countries being cautious, but also in terms of what are the other countries potentially leaning on Russia to say, don't you try that, don't you do that, because actually you're going to mess it up for all of us. The Chinese have got their own strategy when it comes to Taiwan, for example. They don't want it to be that a nuclear weapon is used by the Russians and then the US military goes, right, well, we're going to park nukes right off Taiwan now, because that would be the end game here.
Amy, let's move on to the Mail, and this story about assisted dying suggested that the bill is going to be rushed into law potentially before there could be a vote before Christmas.
Yeah, so this was something that Keir Starmer mentioned when he was campaigning earlier this year, and I think a lot of people who are campaigning on the other side of this will see the word rush and feel, I mean, this is such a sensitive, it's such an in-depth area that is, the word rush shouldn't really be put next to assisted dying. This week we saw a citizens' jury which overwhelmingly said they would support this vote, but then it was found that the voices didn't also represent the other side of the argument. I think when this has been put into practice in other countries, such as Canada, there have been fears of a slippery slope, and then those fears have been realised in many cases. However, this is important to stress that the vote that would be put up in this case would be for people in the last 6 months of their lives, so it wouldn't come with that type of risk. But it is something that Keir Starmer wants to get done before Christmas.
Deeply divisive.
Very, very much so. Understandably so, because, Amy's right to raise the example of Canada that started it off with we're only going to do this in a very limited fashion, and ended up with assisted dying being offered to homeless people and people with depression as a to ease the burden on the healthcare system. I suppose the question I would ask is, do you actually trust the British state to get this right? Because the British state is not having a great time of things. You can hold up one example, which is Switzerland, and say, OK, massive controls, potentially only open, though, to people with the money to do so and to go through those sorts of checks and balances, but does seem to work quite well, so much so that people are prepared to go there. Or do you want the example of Canada, which is a free-for-all and has absolutely degraded as the quality of the state overseeing it actually has degraded as well? And I would then sit back and say, of all the major issues that this country currently has, do we really think that we want to be throwing this back into the mix at this exact moment? I would rather we were getting on top of many other issues, structural issues around, that would end up informing this, such as policing, such as the justice system, to make sure that these things were rigorously investigated, their healthcare system. Let's get on top of these things before we then get into a potentially very tricky area. I do think that it's something, obviously, that is very emotive. It's important to have that discussion, but there are bigger priorities to fix in the British state right now.
Yeah, and Dame Esther Ranson has appealed directly to Sir Keir Starmer and is pressing for some movement on that. Let's have a look at the Express, Amy, and they're claiming that pensioners will be £1,000 worse off under Labour. How so?
So after the winter fuel allowance cut, the Express are now very concerned about Keir Starmer's prospect of cutting the single-person council tax discount, which will overwhelmingly affect pensioners, as many pensioners are widows or widowers. So it's become known as a widow tax. Starmer's refusing to rule it out, which I think is so infuriating for people who want to plan or have financial worries, particularly older people who are currently getting a 25% discount. But it's not just pensioners who are affected by this single-person council tax discount. It's single people, it's single parents. It's people who are vulnerable and are now worrying about what could come with the budget because Starmer's refusing to rule it out. But it's a big amount of money. So if he did cut this, it would raise the Treasury $3 billion a year. So Andrew Rayner also hasn't refused to rule it out. So it's worried that this could come into play. However, council tax is due a reform, just not this one. Council tax bans have been completely outdated. For years, people have been calling for them to be tweaked around, but definitely not in this way.
But this isn't a definite, though.
They're
saying that they haven't ruled it out.
But they won't rule it out.
Amy and Benedict must leave it there. Thank you very much for the moment. Let's take a break. Coming up, Strictly Come Dancing returns, celebrating its 20th anniversary. Do stay with us for more.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's a little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it had happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Don't heavy vehicle. Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
I want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Amy Nickell-Turner and Benedict Spence. Let's have a look at this story on the front page of The Telegraph, and suggesting here that Labour is backing away from their 2030 ban on new petrol cars. And this is something that I believe was in their manifesto.
It was, and this is a suggestion that it'll be that they're going to allow hybrids to remain on the market until 2035, which we think it was also something that was done by Rishi Sunak as well, that they rode back on their initial pledge to get petrol cars off the market. And at the time, that caused a huge furore. And now Labour might have to be doing the same. And the justification that was given by the Tories at the time was that it would put unaffordable costs onto families that they wouldn't be able to meet in that period of time. But something else that wasn't really sort of spoken about quite enough was the actual cost it would place on the British Exchequer in order to get the capacity, you know, the electrical capacity rolled out nationwide was too great, and in some cases was feared that the battery capacity doesn't actually exist. It's projected to exist, but doesn't quite exist at the moment. So one wonders if this is sort of reality coming home to buy maybe for the Labour Party. It's all very well having these objectives and having the sort of the very noble goals that one might have when it comes to environmentalism. But if your country isn't creating the wealth, and if the companies involved in these sort of strategies aren't able to come up with the solutions in time, sometimes reality does hit against those targets, and that can be quite depressing, but sometimes necessary. You can't just say, well, we're going to ban these things if there is no alternative out there.
And Amy, the suggestion is that they're going to allow hybrids to be...
Yeah, they apparently they always
another
left
5
the
years.
possibility of hybrids, and they were a bit ambiguous about it. And now that is the decision. So you'll be able to make hybrid cars until moving that back rather than fully petrol cars. But I just think what a nightmare for the car manufacturers trying to plan and then having the parameters moved all the time. But Benedict's absolutely right. When the Conservatives did something different, it was a furore, to say the least. So it'll be interesting to see whether this is met with the same fury.
The Observer. Nurseries are saying that new rules are reducing their duties to actually crowd control. This in the Observer front page.
So the Conservatives, I think a few years ago, last year in fact, they changed the staff-to-child ratio in nurseries, which meant that nurseries could have more kids and less staff. And I think this is those chickens coming home to roost, because it's now being reported that this shake-up really wasn't successful. And in fact, there are just too many kids in the class. So rather than educating the kids, people are acting more like crowd control. And these are really young kids. These are age 2 to 5 year olds. So they're incredibly difficult to look after with all different needs. So you do need to have that low ratio that they had before.
So now one adult now looks after 5 2-year-olds rather than 4. That's the ratio.
Do you reckon you could do that, Benedict?
Oh, I'm sure. I could sort of manage them with a stick at arm's length. No, you go there, you go there. But you know, everybody already knows, though, childcare is incredibly expensive in this country, as it already is. And, you know, I think short of actually increasing how much you pay nursery staff and, I was about to say child handlers there, you know, people who look after young children, you know, it's sort of allowing them to earn more money. I'm not really sure how you do this.
Children,
yes, for the time being, and every woman watching is going, and for a lot longer, based on this evidence.
Not true. Right, we've just got time to talk about Strictly. It's their 20th anniversary back on our screens tonight, Amy.
Yes, it's the 20th anniversary, but it's slightly under a cloud because of all the recent stories about the behaviour behind the scenes with certain stars being accused of bad behaviour. Now, the dance rehearsals have to include a chaperone. So you've got the professional dancer, the celebrity, and an additional person to check that they're behaving properly, which it doesn't seem quite the glitterball fun that potentially was last year. It's just a bit of a an edge to Strictly Come Dancing this year.
Although there have been people speaking up and saying, you know, their experience was a fantastic one on Strictly and that they still support the show.
Some of these people were obviously brought up like me in the idea that you can just herd people with sticks and just be sort of very physically violent towards them. I mean, look, from what I understand, I mean, we all know television can be very high stress, but certainly professional dancing can be very high stress, and that often fosters sort of very unseemly, not very nice circumstances. But they're high pressure, that's how you get to the top. It doesn't excuse it, but you sort of understand why some people can snap. I wouldn't want to be doing this, put it that way. Hopefully I'll never have to.
Anne Widdecombe being swung around the dance floor, and it seems to have got very serious all of a sudden.
That does sound very serious, to be fair.
Still a very highly popular show.
Yeah.
Amy and Benedict, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. See you in the next hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now. It's been rather cold lately, but temperatures are creeping back up this weekend, and it may even feel rather warm next week. That said, it will be a chilly start under the clear skies across southern Britain on Sunday morning. Meanwhile, cloud and outbreaks of rain will cover much of Ireland, northern England and North Wales, while further north it'll be windy with blustery showers in northwest Scotland. Central parts of Britain will remain cool and cloudy as outbreaks of rain slowly move southwards, but things will gradually brighten up across Ireland. Blustery showers will affect northern Scotland, some heavy with hail and thunder, but elsewhere it'll be mostly fine with bright or sunny spells. Thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain will slowly sink southwards across England and Wales through the afternoon. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the destruction left by almost a year of war. We report from inside Gaza to witness the devastation firsthand.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
This is Sky News at 11 o'clock. The headlines this evening. The Gazan city turned into a wasteland almost a year into the war. Sky News films inside the flattened city of Rafah.
It's impossible to know whether this kind of level of destruction was militarily necessary or whether it was some scorched earth policy.
Labour's relations with their biggest union backer turn frosty as the row over winter fuel payments heats up. The government on the defensive with a man freed from prison under an early release scheme back in jail charged with sexual assault. The Pope calls on American voters